Hi guys, it was theBubblelush. So last week's episode of One Tree Hill was totally boring. There was one redeeming scene where Haley talked to Brooke about forgiving, what's his name? Julian. But other than that, it's kind of a snooze fest, and I was all hopped up on fertility medicine and I didn't feel like dealing with it. This week's episode was a lot better. So I took notes on my iPad using my husband's you scribble. Oh my gosh, I can't even read this. So this episode, there's going to be a lot of jump cuts because I'm going to have to decipher my scribbles. Looks like a 3-year-old wrote this. At the end of episode 3, we see Nathan and Haley doing some Skyping, and Nathan holds up this, what I'm going to call, is a pink moose. And it's a little moose toy for Lydia, and it's kind of cute and funny, but it's definitely very unique. And at the very, very end of that episode, we see that little pink moose laying in the gutter. So you know something bad has happened to Nathan. Haley was up all night waiting for him, and at the beginning of episode 4, we see her the next morning. Nathan's still not there. She calls and leaves a voicemail, and she decides that she's going to go to the police, and she asked Dan to watch the kids, Lydia and Jamie. But Dan said he's got to be out of the house this afternoon. It was a really weird way that he said it. So he wasn't able to watch the kids. So, of course, she calls Quinn, her sister, built-in babysitter. Then it cuts to Brooke in her kitchen saying that, something's up with Haley and she's got to cover for her at the cafe. You can see that something is really bugging Julian, who is still reeling from the fact that he nearly killed his kid by leaving him in the car. And Brooke and him have this little exchange where Brooke tries to build up his self-esteem and tells him that, she forgives him and she thinks he's a wonderful father, and he tells her that the cops aren't going to press charges. And so she ends it, awkwardly enough, by asking him to take the kids to the sitter. I don't know if this is tough love, get back on the horse type of thing, but it seems a little intense. I think it only has been a day or two since the accident. So then we see Chase and not Alex, Tara, in bed, and Chuck walks in. This is the first time that Chuck has ever met Tara. And then it does a quick cut to Clay in therapy. Clay is really a major character in this episode, and they're talking about him in therapy a lot, to the point where I'm like, less Clay, more Nathan. I really want to like Clay this season, but I just don't. We find out that he has dissociative fugue disorder, so basically he becomes someone else and he doesn't have any memory of it. Yep, that sounds about right. The therapist says that he's repressing something, and that the fugues, things, or state, I don't know, whatever, isn't going to get better until he uncovers whatever he's repressing. So I'm assuming we're going to spend at least 6 episodes this season trying to figure out what he's uncovering. It's probably going to go back to Sarah, but maybe something else. Alright, so then we come back to Julian. He's fastening the kids in the car seat. Then we see him double, triple, quadruple checking the car seats. And when he looks into the mirror, he adjusts the rearview mirror to see the kids. And you can just tell he is very anxious and he's very scared about getting back in the car with these kids. Haley and Quinn are talking about Jamie spending the day with Quinn while Haley goes to the police or airport or somewhere, tries to find Nathan. So Haley calls Nathan one last time before she leaves, and the phone's ringing. Then it cuts to this warehouse and there's a car being repaired, and if you remember back to, I don't know, season 1, Scott Motors, Dan used to be a car salesman, and Keith, the brother that Dan killed, used to be a mechanic at Scott Auto Body or something. So it's possible that he's being held at that property. We see a pretty empty warehouse. We see one car, at least, that's being repaired. As it pans across the room, we see a hot plate. We see some dishes and spoons. We see the phone sitting on a table where there is a bottle of alcohol, 2 shot glasses, dominoes, and at least 2 chairs pulled out. So we don't see Nathan, but then we see this hand come by, and it's got a very unique watch or bracelet that kind of looks like a restraining cuff. It's all leather, 2-tone leather, and he's wearing a brown shirt that rolls up. Now, Dan was wearing a brown shirt, brown plaid shirt rolled up, and it's definitely an older man's hand that picks up the phone, but it's not Dan. It's just not Dan. It's not the same shirt. So that person takes the phone and throws it against the wall and smashes it into a million pieces. Commercial break. All right, so then we got the 3 C's. These guys appear a lot in this episode in different combinations, but it's Chuck, Chase, and Chris Keller, the 3 C's. So Chuck's dad is going to show up, and throughout the past 3 or 4 seasons, Chuck's parents have been awful. His mom, I think, is an alcoholic. I don't even know if we've ever heard about his dad, but he's coming home tonight, and so Chuck can't hang out with Chase because he's going to hang out with his dad. So he asks Chris Keller to come and meet his dad, but he doesn't ask Chase. Then Tara walks right past Chuck and Chase and into Chris Keller's arms, and Chuck's jaw hits the floor. And again, worst child actor. I want to like him, but he's just awful. So then we see Clay back at therapy. He asks to do shock therapy instead of regression because he doesn't want to go back to that place. And obviously it has to do with Sarah, right? It's got to do with Sarah. That's all they keep talking about. So then there's a really funny scene. We see Millie for the first time. We don't see Mouth the entire episode, but we see Millie once, and she asks for Brooke to serve her coffee. If you remember back, Brooke is scared of their really fancy coffee machine. So every time someone asks for like a mocha or a chai, she's like, "Did you say chai? Coffee is the new chai." She just like grabs a pot of coffee. So Millie takes a moment to teach Brooke how to use the machine because I guess they did a segment on the Mouth and Millie show all about how to use the fancy espresso machines. It's a neat moment because Millie used to be Brooke's assistant. So the idea of Brooke serving Millie coffee is just kind of a nice little role reversal. So then Chuck and Chase have the discussion about Tara. And Chuck goes, "Well, you didn't know that she was Chris Keller's girlfriend, right?" And Chase goes, "Not at first." And then Chuck admits that he's really disappointed in Chase. And I think it's kind of a telling expression that Chase has on his face. He realizes the mentor role that he has over Chuck and that Tara might just not be worth it. So then Chris Keller shows up at Haley's house and he escorts her to the police station. Brooke, back at the cafe, calls Julian, and it's this weird deja vu moment where she's like, "The sitter just said you're running late. Is everything okay?" Just like in episode 2, 3, I don't know. Is this episode 5? I don't even know where I'm at. And when Julian answers the phone, we see him holding one baby in the hallway of what looks like a doctor's office or a hospital, but where's the other baby? And it cuts to a commercial break, and you don't know if something happened, if he hurt the baby, you don't know what is going on. The doctor determines that Davis is fine, but Julian is not, and she prescribes him 1 day of rest and relaxation, which of course he feels guilty about even thinking of, taking any time to heal himself. He's just still completely eaten up with, how he possibly could have maybe hurt his child. Quinn in a bikini. It has to happen in every episode. Okay, so somewhere in this episode, Tara brought over a plant to Brooke and Haley's cafe. And I immediately think that she's like planted some sort of bug in there to listen in on what they're talking about. And she includes this note that's like, "Friend request," and Brooke makes this funny Facebook joke about blocking Tara. But it turns out the plant is really a bug, and there's like cockroaches in it, and they start crawling out onto Brooke's counter. And then there is a fabulous Brooke scene where she goes over and confronts Tara and starts calling her a bitch, and she calls out Chase because Chase went over to see Tara. And it is just classic Brooke Davis. Like, if you never watched the earlier seasons, that is the feistiness that old Brooke Davis used to have. So then again, Clay at therapy, and the big question is, what are you afraid of? So then Haley and Chris Keller go to the police station, and as soon as she says that my husband was supposed to be there at 9 o'clock the previous night, the police stop her and say that you have to wait 24 hours to file a missing person report, which everyone knows. And the police officer says, "Men leave their wives all the time, especially professional athletes." So Chris Keller and the police officer kind of get into it, and Chris sends Haley over to sit down. Chris Keller actually has this really redeeming moment where, you know that he kind of has some feelings for Haley and there's some affection there, at least on Chris Keller's part. But it's just really nice to see him being human for a second. He's usually so self-involved that it's actually a nice little peek into the real Chris Keller, which we rarely get to see. Surprise, surprise. Clay back at therapy. He sees a little kid and they talk about model airplanes. Seems like they both used to make them with their father, but Clay never flew his because, one, he was afraid of flying, which the kid says that's the best part. And he goes, "Well, I was really afraid of crashing." And the kid goes, "Crashing is the second best part." And the kid just kind of shakes his head and goes, "I can't believe you never tried to fly," which is like so telling and ties back to therapy. And oh, good moment, writers. Good moment. I caught that one. It was good. So back at the bar, Chris Keller approaches Chase for a drink and mentions that he might end up standing up Chuck and his dad. And Chase goes, "You really need to be there for him." And Chris Keller has this funny line about like, "I heard when the bartender gives you a tip, you don't have to tip the bartender." And I was like, oh, that's pretty good. That's a good little line. I've never heard that before, but I like that. That's kind of, it's the only thing the whole entire episode that made Chris chuckle. So then Julian and Brooke have a moment at the cafe where Brooke actually accepts some of the blame for what happened with Davis. If you don't know,
Julian was really busy trying to get someone to rent out a soundstage. Brooke knew that, but one of the twins was sick, so she asked Julian to drop off the unsick twin at daycare so that he wouldn't catch the germs. And while Julian was out running errands, he left the kid in the car seat, and someone noticed him and broke open the window, and he was taken by ambulance. And there was this moment where, at the end of the episode, you didn't know if the baby was alive or dead. But he's fine. And the episode after that, the one that I didn't recap, Julian ends up spinning the entire thing, just totally blaming himself, which is understandable. And Haley talks to Brooke about trying to forgive him, and that, you know, if the roles were reversed, Julian's love would be the only thing that would save her. And so Brooke ends up, in one day, doing a complete 180 and totally forgiving Julian and just becoming like this amazing, loving, wonderful wife that we all hope we could be in that situation. It helps when you have really good writers.
So then Haley goes to the airport without Chris Keller and asks if the flight landed. Flight attendant says, you know, she checks the little computer and she says, yep, the flight landed, no problem. And Haley goes, well, what's my husband on it? And she goes, I can't release anything about the flight manifest. So Haley sheds a few tears and the flight attendant does one little click of the mouse and tells her that, yes, Nathan landed. So Haley's like shocked and confused. She walks outside and in the gutter, she sees the pink moose. She stands up and looks around like she's like under surveillance or something. She looks suspicious at everyone around her, and I swear it gives me like the creepiest chills ever, because we still haven't seen Nathan. We still don't know what's going on. All we've seen is the hand of somebody that has Nathan's phone. So Chase shows up to meet Chuck's dad, but of course Chris Keller does not, and Chuck says, you know, it's okay, sometimes my dad is late. And you see him downplaying the whole thing. And it's sad that such a little kid has already learned to make excuses for his horrible parents. Julian walks down the street, approaches his car, and sees a note under the windshield wiper. And when he looks at it, it says, "Fry your burgers, not your babies," and it has an exclamation mark with a little X. And immediately as soon as I saw the little X, I knew that that was going to be the distinguishing characteristic that Brooke or Julian or someone was going to be able to trace back to whoever left the nasty note on the car. So then he walks into the cafe and he says, you know, why did it take a complete stranger to tell me the truth? And he leaves the note with Brooke. So then you know Brooke is the one that's going to be able to figure out who left the nasty note. Quinn brings both Lydia and Jamie with her to go visit Clay. Clay admits that he's afraid of the missing information, and Jamie again mentions the werewolf thing, and they put the silver coin on Clay's skin, and he's not a werewolf. So Chuck and Clay are playing horse. Chuck gets to HORS, and he's shooting for E when his dad shows up, and his dad is such a stereotypical bad dad, asks Chase, "Are you the sitter?" Like, he doesn't know anything about his kid. And the two of them go in the house and just leave Chase out on the street. It's a really weird scene. Haley's returned to the airport. She's sitting in the living room and she has a pink moose sitting on the coffee table and she's just staring at it. And she starts replaying conversations and trying to put the pieces together. And she just walks up to Dan's room and starts tossing his room, going through all of his drawers. She finds 2 huge wads of money, the photograph of Lydia, and Jamie's baseball. And just then, Dan walks into the room, and he is pissed. "Can I help you?" And Haley goes, "I thought you lost everything in the fire." And she holds up the baseball and the pictures and kind of the money, I think. And then there's this weird tension in the air. So we see Clay talking to that little boy about the model airplanes again. We find out that his name is Logan. I think as long as Clay is going to stay in therapy, Logan is going to be a returning figure. He is a super cute little kid, and he's probably the only one that's going to get Clay to open up about things. Tara's playing the drums with Chris Keller at the studio when Chase walks in and is like, "So is this the work that you missed meeting Chuck's dad for?" And there's this weird little kind of anger between Chris Keller and Chase. Chris Keller goes, "Why don't you call not Alex?" And Chase turns around and kind of looks at Tara and goes, "I already did. She's coming over tonight." And there's this weird little smirk between the two of them. Tara is evil. Brooke keeps looking at that nasty note and she recognizes something. She goes to the trash and she pulls out that friend request note and notices that the exclamation marks match with their little X instead of a dot. She goes over to the other cafe and says, you know, "Is Tara here?" The girl goes, "No," the one that's always smiling. And Brooke goes, "Well, can you leave her a message?" And the girl goes, "Sure." Brooke just walks past her, and that's when the food fight happens. She tosses everything, and if you're going to watch the episode for any reason, watch it for both of the moments where Brooke confronts Tara. She does it twice, once to her face and once by tossing the place, and both of the scenes are fabulous. So then Julian's at this dark bar, because apparently there are dark, dingy bars in Tree Hill, and he confronts like the biggest dude in the place, starts a fight, and the guy takes it outside and starts just punching the heck out of Julian. And Julian's like, "Is that all you got?" And you can tell that he just wants to feel pain. And so when you cut back to the season premiere, that's why Julian is getting his face pounded in. Finally, after a few minutes, we cut back to Haley and Dan. And Haley has this moment where she breaks down, "Where is my husband?" And Dan's like, "I didn't know he was missing." And all of a sudden, Haley just like kind of starts lying to Dan. It's like, "You're right, I'm just being crazy. He probably just missed his flight," even though she knows he didn't miss his flight. She walks up to her room way too calmly, closes the doors, locks her bedroom door. She has these amazing double doors to her bedroom. Really, they're just awesome. She goes into her master bathroom, turns on the faucets, picks up the phone, calls 911, and in a hushed voice says, "I need help. There's a murder in my house." And then it cuts to Dan, who's standing right outside her door. End of episode. Dun, dun, dun. I don't know. This one was crazy. What did you guys think? Who do you think has Nathan? Who has that old man hands? I don't even know of any old characters. It's got to be like someone for hire. Do you think Dan is in on it? Like, seriously. Who else could it be? Leave your reactions to the episode below. Are you liking it so far? Which storyline is your favorite? Which one do you dislike? Do you love Brooke as much as I do? Do you think Haley is awesome? Is she going to solve this herself? She's like, who's that little sleuth girl that all the books used to be written about? You know? Didn't they make a movie with like Rosie O'Donnell or something? If you know what I'm talking about, leave that below too. I will talk to you guys next week.